Welcome back to another episode of Pariah Nation. The title of this video is not clickbait. In 2018, a report compiled by Felix and Benedict Savoy drew on further research done by UNESCO to reveal that around 90% of the material cultural legacy of Sub-Saharan Africa remains preserved and housed outside of the African continent. It goes without question that the overwhelming majority of these artifacts were taken as a part of the decades-long colonial process of systematic looting. Today we will reveal the truth about the African artifacts that are being hoarded in Europe. This video will draw its core data from the already mentioned report published by Felix and Benedict Savoy in response to growing calls from African countries for the artifacts to be returned. So how many African artifacts are currently in European museums? The answer might shock you. Not 1,000, 10,000 or 100,000, but a staggering 431,000 African artifacts are estimated by the report to be present in European museums today. Let's take a closer look at where Europe keeps its loot. In fifth place, we have the Welt Museum in Vienna, Austria, that hosts a total of 37,000 African artifacts. It's important to note that although Austria wasn't a major colonial power, these artifacts could have ended up in this museum via art auctions that were hosted by colonial officials returning from their campaigns. Surprisingly, the British Museum takes fourth place. It is currently storing around 69,000 African artifacts. Third and second place, we have the Branly-Jacques Chirac Museum in France and the Humboldt Forum in Germany. They hold approximately 70,000 and 75,000 African artifacts respectively. Finally, we have the Royal Museum of Central Africa in Belgium, and this comes in first place and does so while leaving a considerable gap. The museum contains a mind-blowing 180,000 African artifacts. That's more than the last two museums combined. Undoubtedly, these numbers are shocking and completely obliterate the regularly professed myth that colonization was a process that was aimed at empowering Africans. If anything, it only proves that colonization was by nature extractionary and exploitative towards Africans. Another blatant example of hypocrisy that we observe is the fact that the basis of colonization was the idea of bringing civilization, in quotes, to African people. This claim is both created and refuted by colonialism itself. If Africans were truly savages, why are nearly 500,000 of our artifacts, specifically art pieces, from the pre-colonial period in European museums? If our art was so worthless, then why showcase it? Take for example the Benin bronzes. These unique example of bronze and brass casting was said to stand among the highest heights of European casting, according to Felix von Luschan, a curator of the Berlin Ethnographic Museum. Moreover, he even claimed that Benvenuto Cellini could not have made a better cast himself. These are powerful statements, considering Cellini was one of the most influential goldsmiths and sculptors in Europe during his time. These bronzes come from the Benin Kingdom, where some scholars say that they were used to complement Benin's enduring oral history tradition. However, in 1897, at a time where there was great tension between the British and the Kingdom of Benin, a British consul named James Phillips entered the kingdom, while also, it should be noted, having intended to previously invade the kingdom. He did this despite being warned that the Oba, another word for the king, would be taking part in spiritual rituals for the next few days, and hence he was not to enter under any circumstances. Trespassing under such tensions, therefore, could be easily interpreted as an act of aggression or even espionage. With this possibly being interpreted to be the case, the kingdom responded to Phillips and his act of trespass by attacking his convoy and killing him, as well as the others that followed him. In response, the British invaded the city in February 1897, killing many and proceeding to burn it to the ground, but not without securing the kingdom's famed bronzes. These bronzes were soon taken to Europe, where they were sold to curators, collectors, and others at extravagant prices. This is just one of the many stories of African artifacts that have been looted during the colonial period. Other artifacts outside the continent include the Rosetta Stone from Egypt, which is currently in the British Museum, the Golden Chalice of Ethiopian Emperor Tewodros II, which is also in Britain, and much more. This leaves us with the main question for us in the modern day. Will they ever be returned? As of now, there's been some discussion in Germany about returning all of the Benin bronzes to Nigeria, with some reports speculating that this process could start as early as 2022. However, this is just a minor battle that has been won against a Western world that is continually resisting accountability for this colonial project. Some museums have offered to loan the artifacts to their respective countries, but any person of reason can see the irony in this. How can one loan what was never theirs to begin with? These are just some of the many questions that Africans have for these institutions. and we are yet to receive satisfactory answers. Some institutions have also claimed that these artifacts would be better off in European museums due to, and I quote, the lack of infrastructure in African countries needed to preserve them. This arrogant position ignores the main rules of proprietary ownership that originate from their own Western liberal philosophy. To claim such a thing, therefore, is the equivalent of stating that it is moral for a violent thief to keep someone's TV because they can take better care of it than the owner. Obviously, this is ludicrous, and we know that the rightful owners of those artifacts should have full powers to deal with and dispose of their property in any way that they wish. This also includes destroying that property if it so pleases the owner. Therefore, for European museums to show such audacity in thinking that they have any right to challenge this right, it indicates a clear preservation of the same colonial ideals that filled them up with these artifacts in the first place. Additionally, others will suggest that securing resources and riches is a part of war, which is something that all nations have experienced, and therefore Africans are seeking special treatment by asking for these items back. This argument, as we'll see, is built on stilts. It does make sense that if a side loses a war, and hence loses its land, that the occupying force can use that land as if it was its own. But this is only moral if the war itself is just. That then begs the question, what was just about the violent colonial expansion of European powers into a continent where the overwhelming majority of the population was not an active threat to Europe or its citizens? The answer is nothing. It goes without saying that the colonial enterprise was rooted in immorality and was spread through murder, rape, and violence. Therefore, where there is no just war, there is no just claim to these artifacts. The most recent objection to returning the Benin bronzes specifically comes from the CenterRight. The argument stems from the fact that the Kingdom of Benin often traded prisoners of war as slaves in exchange for European metals that would in turn be melted and molded to form the Benin bronzes. On this basis, they claim that the current generation should not be able to profit from showcasing these items. This claim is also self-defeating. If it is morally wrong for one to derive property ownership through a morally wrong act, then Britain is also disqualified from owning the bronzes. The act of trespass committed by James Phillips at a time of high tension with the Kingdom of Benin was not only a breach of an international treaty, but a possible act of provocation, and the people of Benin had every right to believe it was so. Hence, Britain has no firm moral basis upon which to suggest that the confiscation of these items was in fact a form of compensatory justice. It is even more nonsensical and arbitrary to appoint Britain, France, and other European nations as the guardians of these artifacts simply because they were the product of Beninese slavery. Simply put, these nations are not, especially by the CenterRight standards outlined in this argument, in any moral position to assume ownership over these artifacts, given their own extensive involvement in the same system of slavery and colonialism. Moreover, under this line of reasoning, British citizens today should not benefit from insurance because of its dark roots in transatlantic slavery. In fact, it is estimated that slave trade-related insurance accounted for around 40% to 60% of British marine insurance from 1793 to 1807. The result of this being the rise of major insurance banking firms such as Lloyd's, which still operates today. If one chooses to make such a point, they should be willing to accept its full moral consequences. In this case, it leads to absurdities. The more prudent approach is to return the bronzes to the kingdom while also advocating for their full history to be presented in their exhibitions. Not only does this preserve the kingdom's right to their property, but it also achieves the aim of educating the masses about the nuances of what is a truly complex history of West Africa. Thanks for watching once again, and I hope that you found this video useful. Feel free to follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Pariah Nation. See you in the next video.